Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the football betting series here on YouTube UEFA edition. Last week out we had our success in our one pick, which was the Manchester United versus Lyon, both teams to score, but we also took an L for the Real Madrid to qualify selection from 2 episodes ago. That means our UEFA record stands at 36 wins, 14 losses with 5 pushes, and a total UEFA profit of £287.55, which does represent a small step back for us. We're really at the business end of the UEFA competitions now. I have 6 picks in today's episode, which will see us take a selection in every single one of the semi-final matchups across the Champions League, Europa League, and the Conference League too. If you think I'm talking some sense today, please drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel for more content. Without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start off with the Champions League, and the first semi-final we're going to focus on is Arsenal versus PSG. Arsenal got the better of Real Madrid in their quarter-final matchup. A 3-0 win at the Emirates, thanks mostly down to Declan Rice's brace of spectacular free kicks, was then followed up by a 2-1 win in Madrid for the Gunners for a 5-1 aggregate win overall. This victory was very much deserved as Arsenal got the better of Los Blancos not just on the scoreline on the night, but across every major win predictor statistic across both of the legs. In terms of form, those wins do mean that Arsenal are now unbeaten in all 4 knockout games of the Champions League. This adds to a run of 8 games unbeaten, including the league record as well. They host the PSG side, who were given a bit of a scare in their second game against Aston Villa. The Parisians won 3-1 in Paris, in a match where they very much dominated their visitors. And this domination did continue early on into the second leg as Hakimi and Nuno Mendes put the French champions 2-0 up on the night and 5-1 up on aggregate. However, from this position, it was Aston Villa that came on much stronger, and this may be due to PSG taking their foot off the pedal somewhat. Tielemans, McGinn and Konsa all netted before the hour mark to put Villa up 3-2 on the night and just behind by the 1 goal with the aggregate scores of 5-4. However, despite Aston Villa being the better side in the second half of the second leg, they couldn't quite find that 4th goal to take this tie into extra time. However, PSG did sneak through 5-4. In terms of form, although PSG lost on the night, they have been successful at navigating past the last 3 knockout rounds. Luis Enrique's experience at this level of Champions League football has proved valuable so far. When we take a look at the head-to-head record, we have to go all the way back to October of 2024 for the last meeting between these sides. This encounter took place in the second round of the Champions League, in which Arsenal won 2-0 at the Emirates with contributions from Havertz and Saka. It was a game in which PSG were perhaps a tad wasteful. Despite being the away side, they took much more of the ball, but their 10 shots were only worth 0.4 xG, so it's perhaps no wonder on the night that they were unable to score. This victory does mean that Arsenal are unbeaten in each of the last 3 competitive meetings between these sides. My prediction for today's game is that both sides will fancy their chances of making the final this year. Both sides are also blessed with a litany of talented players who can create a goal from nothing, as we have seen multiple times this season. However, I would suggest the defences aren't quite up to the level of the attacking talent, so I'm going to be looking at goals in this one. Arsenal have seen over 2.5 goals in each of the last 8 Champions League matches, and in each of the last 4 home matches in the Champions League. Whereas PSG have seen over 2.5 goals in both of the Aston Villa games, as well as 7 of the last 9 Champions League matches, with the 2 exceptions being the Liverpool tie in the round of 16. When we take a look at the head-to-head record, only 1 of the last 3 meetings have seen over 2.5 goals. However, I would expect PSG to be a little bit less wasteful than they were back in October. Therefore, I'm going to back over 2.5 goals for a full stake here in bet number 1. Our second selection features the other Champions League semi-final tie, and that's Barcelona versus Inter Milan. Barcelona battered Borussia Dortmund in the first leg of their quarter-final tie, winning by 4-0, with goal contributions from the big players doing their bit. Rafinha opened the scoring after 25 minutes before a Lewandowski brace in the second half made it 3, and then the final nail in the coffin came from wonder kid Lamine Yamal, as his goal would kill off the tie in the very first leg. In the reverse fixture, Gurucci's hat-trick was not enough in the second leg, and a Bielsa-Biani own goal gave Barcelona their 5th of the tie to stop any chance of the comeback, the Blaugrana winning out 5-3 on aggregate. In terms of form, that loss in Dortmund did put an end to a 3-game winning streak and a 10-game unbeaten run in the Champions League for Barcelona. They host an Inter Milan side whose quarter-final tie against Bayern Munich was probably the most hotly contested tie of the round. In the first leg, it was Martinez that put Inter Milan 1-0 up, and the scores would remain 1-0 for the longest of time, before Thomas Muller levelled up the game in the 85th minute. However, before Bayern fans could get too carried away with themselves, it was Fratesi that regained the lead for Inter Milan to pick up a famous 2-1 win in Bavaria. In the second leg, Harry Kane managed to score for Bayern Munich to level the affair at 2-2. However, Martinez would score again, and an ex-Bayern Munich player, Benjamin Pavard, would score twice in quick succession to fire Inter Milan into a 4-2 lead. So when Eric Dyer scored the third for Bayern Munich, the comeback was simply not to be. Inter qualifying for the semi-finals 4-3 on aggregate. In terms of form, the 2-2 draw on the night did continue a 6-game unbeaten run for the Nerazzurri in the Champions League. When we take a look at the head-to-head records, the last time Barcelona and Inter faced off was the 2022-2023 edition of the Champions League, in Group C. Inter picked up a 1-0 win at San Siro thanks to Hakan Çalhanoğlu, before a 3-3 draw in Barcelona on matchday 4. These results would prove vital as Inter Milan finished second place in the group, ahead of Barcelona, to relegate them into the Europa League. So, Inter Milan have a 2-game unbeaten streak over Barcelona, but these sides have faced off many times down the years in Europe's premier competition. In the last 10 games played since 2009, Barcelona have won 5 of these matches, Inter Milan have won 2 of these games, and the other 3 have ended in draws. My prediction for today's game is that this match is a classic unstoppable force versus the immovable object kind of matchup. Barcelona have scored a competition high 37 goals, averaging 3.08 goals scored per game, whereas Inter Milan have only allowed a competition low 5 goals across 2 matches, or 0.41 goals against per game. So we're either in for a very high scoring affair or a low scoring one, but I've got a good feeling about the overs here. Barcelona have seen over 2.5 goals in each of the last 3 Champions League matches, as well as each of the last 6 home games in this competition. Overall, Barcelona have seen over 2.5 goals scored in 11 of their 12 Champions League games, or 92% of matches. Whereas Inter Milan have seen over 2.5 goals in each of the last 3 matches and in 4 of the last 5 Champions League games of late. However, just 1 of the last 6 away fixtures have seen over 2.5 goals scored, but I'm thinking this is more to do with the quality of opposition they faced in earlier rounds. When we take a look at the head-to-head records, the most recent encounter back in 2022 saw over 2.5 goals, as well as 3 of the last 4 encounters straight up reaching this mark. As such, I do like over 2.5 goals here, but Inter's record is going to temper my stake. I'm going to back this selection for a half stake here in bet number 2. Moving across to the Europa League now. The first semi-final we're going to focus on sees Athletic Bilbao playing host to Manchester United. And Bilbao, they got past Scottish side Rangers in their last matchup. Bilbao were held to a goalless draw by 10-man Rangers at Ibrox in the first leg. However, the return fixture was a simple enough 2-0 win with goals scored by Sanse and Nico Williams. In terms of form, that does mean that the Spanish side are unbeaten in their last 3 Europa League matchups. They host a Manchester United side whose quarter-final second leg against Lyon was one of the watches of the tournament. After a dramatic 2-2 first leg thanks to Cherki's last-minute equaliser, the stage was set for a tense second leg at Old Trafford. Manchester United would take a 2-0 lead into half-time thanks to the unlikely goal scorers of Ugarte and Dalot, but a quick 6-minute double by Lyon's Tolisso and Tagliafico saw the 90-minute score finish 2-2 once again. Now, extra time does have a bit of a reputation for being a dull affair, but this game was the absolute exception to this. Lyon started off better with goals from Cherki and Lacazette to hand Lyon a 4-2 lead on the night and a 6-4 lead on aggregate overall. However, Manchester United did remember that they were the side of the last-minute comeback, Ruben Amorim channeling his inner Alex Ferguson, and the Red Devils managed to score 3 times within a 7-minute span. The first goal was a converted Fernandes penalty, with Kobbie Manu scoring on the stroke of the 120th minute to tie the game up once again. Then 1 minute later, Manchester United managed to win the ball back after Lyon's kickoff, and they launched the ball in the box from the left flank for Harry Maguire to nod the ball home for a 5-4 win on the night and a 7-6 aggregate win in dramatic circumstance. In terms of form, that comeback win continued what has been a really good showing in Europe for the Red Devils this season. They're yet to taste defeat across their 12 matches on the continent. When we take a look at the head-to-head record, it's been a fair while since Bilbao have played Manchester United. We have to go all the way back to the 2011-2012 edition of the Europa League. Bilbao won both legs in the round of 16 clash, 3-2 at Old Trafford and then 2-1 at Bilbao, for a 5-3 aggregate win. Despite Wayne Rooney scoring all 3 goals for Manchester United, the braces of Oscar de Marcos and Fernando Llorente and a goal from Muniain was simply too much for Manchester United to overcome. Bilbao went on from this success to go all the way to the final of the Europa League before falling to fellow Spanish side Atletico Madrid. My prediction for today's game is that with the most recent encounter being 13 years ago, I don't think we can really read anything into those results. However, the more recent games in the Europa League does indicate that both sides have an ability to find the back of the net, as well as allowing a few goals themselves, so I'm going to be looking at both teams to score. Bilbao have seen both teams to score in 4 of the last 6 Europa League matchups, and in 2 of their last 3 home games, whereas Manchester United have seen both teams to score in each of the last 4 Europa League matches, and in 5 of their 6 away matches in this competition. When we take a look at the head-to-head record, for what it's worth, both teams to score did come up at the round of 16 match back in 2012. Therefore, I'm going to back both teams to score for a full stake here in bet number 3. The second Europa League semi-final sees Tottenham Hotspurs playing host to Bodo Glimt, and Spurs they managed to get past Frankfurt in their quarter-final tie. Hugo Ekitike opened the scoring for Frankfurt 6 minutes into the affair before Pedro Porro managed to equalise in the first half for a first leg score of 1-1. Taking a look at the stats though, Spurs were the much better side on the night, but just simply unable to find that winning goal. However, the third and final goal of the tie would come in the second leg. Maddison was brought down by the onrushing goalkeeper, and Dominic Solanke tucked away the resulting penalty for a 2-1 aggregate win. In terms of form for Spurs, they are unbeaten in their last 3 Europa League games. They host a Bodo side who emerged victorious from their quarter-final matchup against Lazio. I think Bodo shocked a few neutrals, including myself, with the nature of their 2-0 win in Norway. Whilst 2-0 itself isn't a massive shock, on the scoreboard, the nature of the win absolutely was. Taking a look at the stats, we can see that Bodo dominated the affair and generated over 9 times the amount of expected goals of their visitors. However, in the second leg, Lazio would flip the script and they dominated things at home. Castellanos opened the scoring in the 21st minute, but the Italians would have to wait all the way until the 93rd minute for Noslin's goal to put them 2-0 up on the night and force extra time at 2-2. Dia's 99th minute goal would hand Lazio the first lead of the tie before Helmensen's 109th minute equaliser meant the tie would be settled on a penalty shootout. Bodo were the better side on spot kicks, winning 3-2 and securing their spot in the semi-final. In terms of form, it's been mixed for Bodo. Of the last 6 Champions League knockout games, they've won 3 and lost 3, but they've always managed to find a way through. There's no head-to-head record to speak of between Spurs and Bodo, so straight on to the prediction. My prediction for today's game is that with Spurs safe from relegation in the Premier League and nothing else to fight for in this season, the Europa League is their only chance to qualify for the Champions League next year, and comparing the 2 squads, there's no doubt that Spurs are the stronger of the 2 sides. Spurs are around 1-3 to pick up a win at home, but given their sheer inconsistency this season, I'm going to feel a lot better about backing them to qualify and giving them the full 180 minutes and maybe even penalties against a gritty Bodo side. So with all of that taken into account, I'm going to back Spurs to qualify for a full stake here in bet number 4. Moving from the Europa League to the Conference League now, the first semi-final sees Djurgården playing host to Chelsea. Djurgården overcame a first leg deficit to reach the semi-final against Rapid Vienna. Rapid escaped the first leg with a narrow 1-0 win thanks to a Fidel own goal, but it was Djurgården who would win the second leg by 2-1 on the night, and then in extra time, Gullikson's brace was the difference between the sides as Djurgården won 4-1 on the night and 4-2 on aggregate. In terms of form, it's been mixed, 2 wins and 2 losses in the last 4 Yukon knockout games, following what was a 4-game winning streak to close the league phase of the competition. They host a Chelsea side who sailed into the semi-finals on the back of their 4-2 aggregate win against Legia Warsaw in the previous round. The Blues won 3-0 in Poland thanks to George and a Madueke brace, before losing the second leg by 2-1. However, in truth, Chelsea just managed the second leg, and Legia took advantage of a side that were more focused on proceeding into the semis than it was winning on the night. In terms of form, this loss did break Chelsea's perfect run of 8 consecutive wins in the Conference League, but I suppose all good things must come to an end. But if it did mean losing by 2-1 in the second leg, in a tie where you'd already won the first match 3-0, I think Maresca and a lot of Chelsea fans would have taken that. There's no head-to-head record to go off between these sides, so straight on to the prediction. My prediction for today's game, as I said with Spurs in the previous selection, there's a large gap in quality between these sides. When we take a look at UEFA's coefficients, Chelsea are the 9th ranked club, compared to a Djurgården side who sit 63rd in the rankings, and that's only thanks to a strong showing in the Yukon this season. Otherwise, they would absolutely be outside of the top 100. Chelsea still have a number of tricky games to play in the Premier League. They are fighting for a top 4 spot as well, so their attention is going to be split here. However, despite this, I do have faith in the Blues being able to handle a Djurgården side with relative ease, even off on the road. At 1-3, I'm going to back them to win in 90 minutes for a full stake here in bet number 5. Our 6th and final pick in today's episode sees Real Betis playing host to Fiorentina. And Betis managed to get past Polish side Hagonia in the previous round. The Spanish side won 2-0 in Betis thanks to contributions from Bakumbu and Rodriguez in a game in which they dominated from start to finish, and to be honest, could have added a few more goals. The reverse fixture in Poland saw a 1-1 draw, and whilst Betis were the better side on the stat line, when we take a look at the numbers, the match was a lot more closely contested. However, the Spanish side did manage to progress through the tie by 3-1 on aggregate. In terms of form, this result means that Betis are now unbeaten in their last 4 Conference League knockout games. They host a Fiorentina side who did not make easy work of their quarter-final matchup against Slovenian side Celje. The Italians were 2-0 up in the first leg before Scholbe scored a penalty to give Celje some hope. The second leg was also rocky, as Fiorentina were dominated in the second half. Whilst they did concede twice in this period, Moise Kean did manage to score with what was their only shot on target in the second half to see Fiorentina progress narrowly 4-3. In terms of form, the recent draw does mean they are unbeaten in their last 3 Conference League matchups. Surprisingly, there's no head-to-head competitive record between Fiorentina and Betis, so we're straight on to the prediction. My prediction for today's game is that with Betis sitting 6th place in La Liga and Fiorentina sitting 8th place at Serie A at time of recording, the Conference League may be their only chance to secure Europa League football next season, and both sides are going to take this game incredibly seriously. As such, I'm expecting a slower pace of game, and both sides will look to feel each other out in this first matchup, which frankly is the most difficult matchup they've been handed to this point in the competition. I think that no one is going to want to throw away their shot of Europa League football next season, so I am looking at the unders here. Betis have seen under 2.5 goals in both of the last 2 Yukon games, and in 2 of their 3 home matches in the knockout stages, as well as 4 of their 6 games at home on the continent this season. Whereas Fiorentina, on the other hand, they've seen exactly none of their last 4 Conference League games go below 2.5 goals, and in fact only 2 of their 10 Conference League games saw less than 2.5 goals scored. But I am going to suggest this is more to do with the quality of opposition and squad rotation from Fiorentina than anything else. As said previously, there's no head-to-head record. With everything considered, I am looking at under 2.5 goals scored. But considering Fiorentina's high goal-scoring record this season, I am only going to back it for a half stake to finish up today's episode. So there we have it, 6 picks in today's episode, so thank you for bearing with me in a slightly longer episode duration. We're kicking things off in the Champions League with PSG versus Arsenal. We're backing over 2.5 goals, odds of 1.9, a £40 full stake to return 36. In the other semi-final, Barcelona versus Inter Milan, we're also taking over 2.5 goals, odds of 1.6, a half stake of £20 to return 12. Across the Europa League now, Bilbao versus Manchester United. I am going to back both teams to score, but at the time of recording, the odds are not live for this market, so I will back that for a full stake of £40, and I will leave a pinned comment down below with the updated odds once the market goes live. The second Europa League matchup sees Spurs versus Bodo Glimt. I do think Spurs will win on the night. I do think Spurs will qualify, but I just feel a lot more comfortable backing them to qualify at around about the same odds as it would be to win the match. Odds of 1.27, I'm backing this for a £40 full stake to return £10.80. And finally, with the Conference League, we've got Djurgården versus Chelsea. I'm going to be backing the Blues of London at odds of 1.28, a £40 full stake to return £11.20. And wrapping up today's episode, we've got Betis versus Fiorentina. That should say under 2.5 goals, so I'm going to back under 2.5 goals, odds of 1.67, a £20 half stake to return £13.40. So across the midweek, we're going to be risking up to £200 to hopefully pick up at least £83.40, plus whatever the Manchester United potential profit is. Will we do so? There's only one way to find out, and that's to tune into next episode. But if you have made it to this point in the video, please drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel for more content. And as always, have yourself a lovely day.